Hello, welcome to Governance and Technology. Today we will talk about the structures of companies and not-for-profit organizations, sometimes called associations. We will discuss the top structures from the governance perspective of any company, not-for-profit organization, association, and similar. We will also have a very brief look into historical reasons for those elements and why we benefit today out of having them. Structures that we'll be discussing today are common in various countries of Commonwealth, and also they appear in other westernized countries such as USA, parts of the Europe, and so forth. Every country has a variation in a legal shape and form, how these elements work, how the liabilities transfer. Structures and liabilities that we'll be discussing are based on Australian model. However, Australian model is more or less copy from UK model, and UK model has been used all around the world in certain variations. One interesting thing that you may not know is that whether you set up a single person company or you're working in a large multinational, the core elements are actually the same. When you're working as a single person company, you basically have all of those roles into yourself. More than 400 years in past, East India Company has been formed. Following some previous major conflicts, UK found itself with a lot of ships. Wooden ships of that time required a lot of maintenance. They require even today, but you can imagine how much they would have costed more than 400 years ago. They were big, they were expensive, they were slow, they were leaking, and they required almost a yearly maintenance. Just like today when we have investors which have money and they buy shares, they fund projects, they fund things in order to get some return. Back then, those concepts already slowly existed. With a large number of ships which were doing nothing more than floating in a harbor and causing some costs, investors had the idea, why don't we take these ships and try to trade? With these big ships being available and investors being willing to put money but not get involved into nitty-gritty of actual day operations, models that have been discussed for quite some time have been formalized, and therefore East India Company has been born. The main principles that this company has been founded on exist till today. Of course, there are many more laws these days, and there are many more complications, and even in recent years, complications are growing almost exponentially. However, the core reasons why we have these elements are common today. Now imagine yourself in that time being wealthy, having money, and investing in many various things. You cannot oversee every single thing. Just like you cannot do it today. You go on an online platform, you put some stocks, you do a little bit of research, and you just go to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. You buy, you sell, you buy, and sell. So first element needed to found such company were investors, what we call shareholders. Shareholders gave some money and appointed certain people to run it for them, and all they were interested in getting some profit and keeping an eye from a distance what is happening, potentially replace leaders, and so. All these people were interested is giving some money, let someone run the operations, and then eventually get some money back, plus returns or ongoing income. And now if you've been wondering who those people are, well, they elected themselves a board. Board members may or may not be shareholders, although it is not unusual to see major shareholders to have a board position. Board is a group of people who are looking at the high-level goals. In order to form a company, shareholders then, same as today, have to write a first document called Constitution. Constitution defines who does what kind of relationships you have. Constitution document also exists in not-for-profits. We will come back to that a little bit later. Now when the Constitution document has been written, you have major instructions that shareholders, the founders of the company, want board and the rest of the company to achieve. Everything that happens within a company has to be guided by the core principles in Constitution. This is why you do not put a very small specifics in a Constitution document. In order to change a Constitution document, you need to get a confirmation from shareholders. In the case of not-for-profits, associations, and similar structures, we don't have shareholders, we have members. In order to change a constitution in a not-for-profit, you will typically have to run a referendum which goes to all members. It's very important to understand that constitution typically cannot be changed by board, and it cannot be changed by management or any other lower structures in a company. Another very nice benefit of being a shareholder, and just a shareholder, is that you almost hold no liabilities. You give money to buy shares, and whatever happens to the company, whatever decisions happen, even if there is a criminal case or if there is a bankruptcy, the biggest risk the shareholders have is the amount that they actually invested. This historical separation is very important. Imagine yourself today going on a trading website, buying some stocks that seem to be looking good, having some really nice charts, and then 2 years later you get a lawsuit because company did something. You would not feel very comfortable about it. So that principle is valid still today. Now, constitution may reference to some other documents which will help govern the organization, where you do not need to have approval for a change by all owners. In order to achieve that, for example, very common in not-for-profit organizations is to define a standing order document. Standing orders is typically a document which requires boards to agree on something, but they will require a high percentage. Typically, boards will rule with a majority, so half of the board members plus one, but you can, for example, define a document in which they have to agree with at least 2/3 or 3/4 or more in order to have a ruling. I happen to be this moment a board member where we do have standing orders. In order to change standing orders, you need to have 2/3 of a board plus one member to agree on any particular topic. Now, you will quite often hear that board has a helicopter view of matters underneath. Board will not discuss individual issues and problems unless they have to discuss those problems in order to change some policies. Board will be closely looking at wishes of owners through the constitution document and decide on certain strategies. Do we want to partner with this? Do we want to get into that? Do we want to establish new policies? How are our financials going? And so forth. Board on a non-executive level typically means that board members cannot make a decision by themselves. It is a collective mind type of a mindset, and everything needs to be decided in a group. Typically, board will have a chair, and the rest of the board members will be equal. Chair typically doesn't have any additional privileges, also has one voting right, but has ability to affect the agenda, to give the word, and so forth. However, everyone has to be heard. So how does board enforce things? Can a board member or the whole board go to an employee and request, I want you to do this? Typically, no. There are two ways how is this typically done. First way, and the traditional way, is that board appoints CEO, Chief Executive Officer. It is a bottleneck where all the decisions of the board, which are based mostly on policies, governance, finances, and some particular challenges, they go to CEO, and board orders CEO, listen, you have to do these things, achieve those things. At that time, board moves on to another topic, and they keep discussing another topic, and after some time, they will approach CEO and ask, how are things going? Give us some reports. Most employees see CEO of a company as sort of a god, because it's typically the highest point that they will ever see. But when you start understanding how these structures work, CEO is the highest position servant in a company. CEO will typically find himself or herself in between laws, restrictions, what they're allowed to do, not allowed to do, how can they hire, various safety concerns, and so forth, combined with objectives that board gave them to do. Do you think your CEO is overpaid? I don't think you would like to sit in their shoes. It is not that simple as it sounds. It's not all about great cars, first-class airplane tickets, and so forth. And when it's a smaller company or organization, you will find that it is even tougher. CEO, within the budget that they have and certain guidelines being provided by a board, will hire and fire people, raise funds, do activities, buy and sell companies, invest, do other things where you need an executive power. CEO has executive power where they can do things. Second way how board can have some executive powers is to have a little bit more complicated board setup. For example, You can have certain board members which also have roles in a company. There will be a difference between non-executive director and just a director. For example, you might have a treasurer on a board which will have executive hat when it's dealing with the budget, although budget needs to be presented to board where treasurer will take off their executive hat, behave like a board member. The whole board needs to look into the budget. They all need to agree. Even if treasurer makes a mistake, everyone will be blamed for it. It's very important to know. And then they return the budget to treasurer, make any modifications and put it in place where treasurer puts executive hat back. Now, in an ideal world, shareholders in companies or members in not-for-profits, they should be completely separated from the board. Board should be completely separated from executive duties. CEO would typically be separated from the board. Board should be able to hire and fire CEO as they see fit. This is because sometimes there is a conflict between CEO and the board where board basically loses the control of the company. It is a problem. A reason to separate board from shareholders is to limit the risk. If something goes wrong, if there is a decision which has been made wrong or there is a consequence which ends up falling on board members, if you're a shareholder, your shareholder protections will not help you because you also sit on a board. That's why if you're a shareholder, it's important to consider, do you really need to be a director? Being a director on board is an exciting role. I personally enjoy it, but it is not cut for everyone. If you have substantial wealth, you need to have all kinds of protections. Some of the wealthiest people in the world said, own nothing, control everything. One way of doing that is to be an active shareholder, where you clearly own something, but everything else that you own will be hidden in all kinds of trusts, and you are generally protected because liabilities from board will not all flow to you. Now you may be wondering, what if you're a one-person company or a tiny company? I have a surprise for you. You're one shareholder, you're one director, you're one CEO. Anything goes wrong, responsibility is on you. Charming. So what is the situation with not-for-profits? In a way, I already answered that question. Instead of having shareholders, you have members, board is still board, and CEO and other executive functions go underneath and below. It is quite common to see in not-for-profits that board members are being elected from members, and they quite often receive some executive powers. This requires your brain to be split in at least 2 modes, maybe 3 modes, where you are board member, where you're executive, and very likely a member itself. A common misconception in many not-for-profits is that if you're volunteering, if you're not being paid, and you're here and there just voting yes to some decisions, that there are no consequences for you. Many have been proven wrong by losing their houses, by going into bankruptcy, by getting the orders to not being able to start a new company for 10 years or so. If you're looking at being a board member of a tiny not-for-profit club, or you're looking into being a board member of a large financial institution, the legal liabilities that can fall on you are almost the same. Of course, the risk may be different, but certain things can happen, and the protection that various insurances and other structures provide you may not be sufficient. I'm not saying it's not good to do that. Volunteering, helping community, helping people sharing same interests or hobbies is important, and it's something that really helps many countries run all kinds of services, including life-saving services. But that also means that you should get some education, gain some knowledge, ask other people, get some courses, and become more proficient. Another thing to understand about the board is that board needs to respect wishes and desires of shareholders or members through constitution, not necessarily through direct communication. This is very important because you may have members or shareholders demanding certain things of board which could be bad for the company. If you put those things in place, you're basically breaking your own so-called fiduciary duty, where you're required to do everything for the benefit of the shareholders or members. But what is benefit? That is basically defined in a constitution document. There is an increased trend of so-called shareholder activism, but in essence, board needs to be true to constitution, to laws. Laws are higher than the constitution, and overall well-being of the organization. There can be a situation when board wants to do something where shareholders or members completely disagree with. If board members believe that there are strong reasons to do that, they should persist. At this point, there is a risk that shareholders or members will raise a no confidence vote and remove board members. However, the new incoming board will review all of the facts, all of the documentation, what happened, what were the reasons, and they will make a decision. It is perfectly possible that they will take the same action as the previous board. This is because board will have good access to information, they will be able to talk to management, they will get a lot of feedback, and while they can present those findings to shareholders, their view has more depth than necessary shareholders will have. Do you think that as a major shareholder you should be forcing a board to do something? It sounds logical at the first look, but it is actually unfair. Imagine if I'm telling you to do something where you can lose your house, where you can lose your wealth, where you can even lose your freedom, and I bear no consequences apart maybe losing my investment. It is not fair. This is why we have a separation between shareholders or members and the board. Those people look into matters, they make a decision based on their risk tolerance and based on number of factors, guided by constitution and high-level goals of the company or organization. However, they are not here to listen what they are being told. Of course, reasonable boards will listen what members or shareholders want. That is perfectly normal. They always need to look into things through a prism of documents. So how do board members reach an agreement? Ideally, board is not a big group of people. Some say that the ideal number is around number 7. Of course, there are many exceptions ranging from a few to really large boards. It is highly advisable for any board to have at least some independent non-executive members. The benefit of this is that these people are not vested in local topics. They bring external knowledge, experience, and fresh view. Don't forget, board people are about the view, high-level things. They will go into certain details like finances, liabilities, insurances, and some other matters, risks, and now in modern day, even cybersecurity. They will also discuss matters of regulations where you need to define or declare situation with Modern Slavery Act and gender or race or other matters that are being discussed differently in different countries. They need to make sure that company or not-for-profit organization meets all of those requirements, and they order CEO to do the legwork. If you have a not-for-profit which has only hundreds or maybe a few thousands of members, it may be difficult to find highly skilled board members. Having 1, 2, 3 of those coming completely independently externally, and these days you can find both paid and volunteers, you can ensure that the good governance is being maintained. Not all organizations do that, however. Similar goes when you have a company with only few shareholders, or if you have a company which had several rounds of investments where every investor put a board person, they may struggle with a lot of vested interest. Don't forget, the person who has vested interest in some shares, whether as a big shareholder or running an investment organization, they have interest. At certain times to do this, at certain times to do that, to buy something, to sell something, to move money there. This is why board members always need to declare conflict of interest. But it's not just about declaring conflict of interest. And this is also one of the many reasons why we like to have these things separated. I agree, it is an ideal world, that is rarely entirely the case, but these are the core principles. Now there is so much more that we can discuss on this topic. After all, we have a whole channel about it, and I will be coming back here and there, but at this moment in time we will end at this stage. So tell me, what will be your dream role? Do you want to be a big shareholder? Do you want to be a board member? Do you want to be CEO? Leave some comments underneath. Thank you for watching this video, and see you next time.